History. There are so many stories to tell and so many ways to go about telling it. But we learn from people's journeys and experiences that have often impacted our own lives in ways that we could never even imagine. It's hard to remember essays we were forced to write by the crack of a whip in our school days. But feelings. If a subject matter makes us feel something, we're much more likely to remember it. And that is why bringing stories from history to life is so important. Then we can live it, we can breathe it and feel it. The tale of the suffragettes is one such story. All of our lives in the UK have been directly affected by their actions, without whom women today would not have the right to vote. So basic a human right, it is hard to think that that was ever in question. Oh, but it was. As an actor, I've spent the last few months working on a theatrical production about the family at the heart of the suffragette movement. Emmeline is a play produced by the Theatre Lab Company and written by Beatrice Hyde with the sole purpose of bringing the incredible story of the Pankhurst family to life. Who were the suffragettes? They were a part of the Votes for Women campaign that had long fought for the right for women to vote in the UK. As their means of protest developed into militancy, the Daily Mail coined the term the suffragettes to describe them. Taking it in their stride with an all publicity is good publicity approach, they took ownership of the name, using art, debate, propaganda and an attack on property which included window smashing and arson to apply pressure on the UK government. Emmeline Pankhurst was their leader and champion, whose 40-year campaign achieved complete success in the year of her death, 1928, when British women over 21 obtained the vote for the first time on equal terms with men.
I think it's very important because all the sort of female issues of nowadays are sort of, have been repeated for so many, many years. I found out yesterday that women and women only got the vote at the age of 18 in 1969, which is still such a very short time ago. So there's so many of these issues that are still pertinent today that we're talking about in the play.
I think that there's a lot in this story that really resonates with current debates and struggles that are still going on within the feminist movement, but also within other social movements. Certain issues to do with violence and protest, militant tactics, I think are always still very controversial. Say most recently with the Insulate Britain protests that have been going on, blocking roads, road disruptions, and I think that even when people agree with a cause like climate justice, there's always still so much controversy around any kinds of militant tactics that disrupt people's lives.
The debates surrounding the right of protest, the legality of protest and the means of protest are still as prevalent today as they were in the early 1900s. Now, Emmeline founded the Women's Social and Political Union with her daughters, Christabel, Sylvia and Adela. But even within their own family dynamic, they had differing opinions on what should be the right approach. Sylvia was concerned with the increasing levels of violence used by the WSPU. She thought that they were in fact losing ground by alienating those people who actually agreed with them in principle. After arguing with her mother, she left the union, but Emmeline stuck to her aim for the WSPU of waking up the nation to the cause of women's suffrage through deeds, not words. Now, through the play, that which history often overlooks is explored. The people behind their facades, and the effects that spearheading a political movement would have on a family and its relationships. But what did the suffragettes actually do, and how did they fight for the vote? Well, first of all, in 1906, they relocated their headquarters from Manchester to London so they could protest where the government was actually situated. They would petition Downing Street, heckle MPs, and chain themselves to buildings. Now, they were growing quickly. They had both paid and voluntary office staff working on a weekly newspaper, which by 1909 had a circulation of 22,000. Soon, they would be a nationwide organisation with 90 branches across the UK. On March 10th, 1914, the National Gallery would fall victim to their protest. Mary Richardson entered the gallery, a small, soberly dressed woman carrying a sketchbook, looking somewhat inconspicuous. She approached Velázquez's infamous Rokeby Venus. took out a narrow meat chopper that she had concealed up her sleeve, and began slashing away at the canvas. The room attendant was delayed in stopping her by slipping on the recently polished floor when running to intervene. Can you imagine? Before they managed to restrain her, she inflicted 7 wounds to the painting, specifically targeting the nude form of who she called
the most beautiful woman in mythological history, as a protest against the government destroying Mrs. Pankhurst, who is the most beautiful character in modern history. Justice is an element of beauty as much as colour and outline on canvas.
Some decades later, in an interview, Mary also talked about the way that male visitors to the gallery used to gape at the painting all day. It was the perfect target for a suffragette attack, not only for Emmeline, but also for the feminist movement as a whole. An artwork that objectifies women, focusing entirely on the female form, while obscuring any sense of character belonging to the individual depicted. Now, art galleries may no longer be a place for gaping, but 100 years later, Mary would still be fighting the same fight, only with newer, more social forms of objectification. The extent of their devotion to the cause did not stop there. Belief in a cause greater than oneself can empower people in ways we mere mortals find hard to imagine. For many of the suffragettes, they were willing to risk their own safety for the good of the cause. You may have heard of Emily Wilding Davison.
What's your name? Emily Wilding Davison. Glad to have you with us. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time.
The martyr. So fearless that in 1913 she ran out in front of the King's horse at the Derby. Was it suicide? Was it an accident? We will never know what was going through her mind in the lead up to this historical moment. But one thing is for certain. She will have known the risks, but her view of the world and desire for change gave her the strength to do what she believed was right. When we as a company took away the history books, the question of right and wrong, the academia that analysed, examined and then cross-examined time and time again, we found real people, who they were and what they did. And we couldn't help but be moved by their story, because at the heart of it, it is just ordinary people, like you and I. But the difference is that they saw a chance for change, and they had the courage to stand together and make it happen.
We have a great mission, the greatest mission this world has ever known. I incite this meeting to rebellion!
The women are fast approaching.
Deploy the full force of the Metropolitan Police. The toughest of the lot.
What orders should we give them, Mr. Churchill?
To keep the women away from the Prime Minister at all costs.
They will not be stopped.
Now we must make them stop.
How, sir?
By any means necessary.
How are they treated by the government? On the 28th of November 1910, which would come to be known as Black Friday, the police were given free rein to respond with violence towards the suffragette protesters. There were 130 accounts of women sustaining injuries from the police and 29 statements including sexual assault. Over the course of their agitation, over 1,000 women were imprisoned, including Emmeline and her daughters. The government refused to treat them as political prisoners, and so the women resorted to the hunger strike. In response, the government introduced a policy of force feeding, but when this policy of force feeding failed, they passed a law that allowed hunger striking suffragettes to be released from prison when they were weakened, but only on license. Once their health was restored, they would be rearrested. Now, the suffragettes referred to it as the Cat and Mouse Act because for prisoners to be released only to be rearrested again was just like a cat playing with a mouse.
No, let's skip the pleasantries, shall we, Mr. Prime Minister? Now tell me, why have you called me here today? What do you want from me?
We have a serious munitions shortage as the manpower from the factories was needed in the front line.
Oh, I see. And you want the women to make up the shortfall?
If you could call upon your followers to take the men's places in the factories, then we could redress the urgent need for workers.
Well, my women are certainly very skillful in the field of munitions now.
I'm well aware.
But why should I help you?
I'm not asking you to help me. I'm asking you to help your country.
It is fair to say that the WSPU did not win women the right to vote before the outbreak of war in 1914. However, their campaigning eased the way for women to take a more active role in society during the war. Now, their invaluable contribution to the war effort was acknowledged with the granting of the parliamentary vote to a limited number of women over the age of 30 in 1918. Now, progress may have been slow, but the wheels had been set in motion. Emmeline Pankhurst had successfully woken up the nation.
Our agitation will go forward with deeds, not words.
These are words! These are words! These are words!